Before we begin today's episode, I want to ask us a question. Have you ever looked at your life and quietly thought, this is not how I imagined things to be? Not because your life is bad, not because you're lazy, not because you're ungrateful, but because somewhere along the line, life stopped looking like what you had in your head. Maybe you thought you'd be married by now, you would have that career figured out by now, you would have all the financial stabilities. Maybe you thought people would finally be celebrating you by now. Maybe no one knows it, but every now and then you find yourself grieving a version of your life that never happened or still haven't happened. A version of yourself you thought would become. A future you were certain was coming. That is what we're talking about today. This is In My Headspace Podcast. Hey my lovelies, welcome to another episode of In My Headspace Podcast, the place where we have honest conversation about the things we don't always say out loud. And today we're talking about something that I think a lot of people have experienced or still experiencing, but very few people have the language for it. We're talking about grieving expectations. When people hear the word grief, they often think about losing someone. But grief isn't always about losing a person. Sometimes it's also about losing a dream. It's also about losing an expectation. Sometimes it's about realizing that life didn't happen the way you planned it. And honestly, that kind of grief can be very lonely because not everyone understands it. Not everyone talks about it. No one talks about what it feels like to spend years imagining a future, and then you wake up one day realizing you're nowhere near where you thought you would be. Of course, by now you would know that I'm such a huge planner. I used to be a huge planner. I love plans. I love targets. I'm meeting up with targets. I'm not spontaneous, of course. Everything has to be planned out. I love knowing what came next. I have this beautiful picture in my head of how life should be. I always walked with that. Everything had to make sense. And suddenly, things didn't happen the way I thought they would. Some things didn't happen at all. Some doors stayed closed. Some haven't even happened yet. Some prayers haven't been answered yet. And I had to confront something difficult. I wasn't grieving a person. I was grieving an expectation. I was grieving the life I thought I would have. And maybe that's where some of you are today. Maybe you're carrying disappointment that no one knows about. Maybe you're carrying silent heartbreaks over a life that looks completely different from one that you imagine. Maybe every birthday feels heavier now, not because you're getting older or you have to eat cake, but because it feels like another year has passed and you're still waiting. Maybe family gatherings feel uncomfortable, not because you don't love your family, not because you don't love your friends, but because you're tired of hearing questions like, what's next? What have you been up to? Any news? Anything happening? And it's not because you're jealous or you're bitter, but because their success reminds you of where you thought you would be. And if that's you, I want you to know something today. You're not a bad person for feeling that way. You're human, and disappointment hurts. Especially when it's disappointment you never expected. The one you could have sworn that never happened to you. You're right on track, you're doing everything right, you're moving, and the disappointment happens. And you're shocked. How will this happen to me after all the work I put in, after all the effort? But here's what I've been learning. The life you planned is not only the life capable of making you happy. Now I will say that again. You can write it down anywhere. The life you planned is not the only life capable of making you happy. Because sometimes we become so attached to one version of our future that we refuse to see the possibilities standing right in front of us. We spend years mourning one closed door that we completely ignore the open ones. And that's understandable, and it's also very dangerous. Because if you're not careful, grieving an expectation can make you miss the life you're currently living. One thing that changed my perspective recently was realizing this. Defeated people stop trying. Think about it again. When people are truly defeated, they stop applying. They stop learning, they stop dreaming, they stop showing up, they stop believing, they stop hoping, they stop trying. So if you're still trying, you're still praying, you're still learning, you're still getting back after disappointments, even if you fall, then maybe you're not defeated. Maybe you're not tired. And there's a huge difference between being tired and being defeated. Tired people will move. Defeated people will stop. Tired people still hope. Defeated people will quit. Tired people need rest. Defeated people surrender and they don't even look back. You just hear things like, oh, I've put in my all. There's no result, so I'm tired. I'm giving up. I am not going back to it. And maybe someone is listening to me today has mistaken exhaustion for failure. Maybe you have convinced yourself that because life isn't giving you the way you expected, you have somehow failed. But that's not necessarily true. You may simply be carrying too much disappointment, and disappointments have weight. Expectations have weight. Unanswered prayers have weight. Delayed dreams have weight. The future you imagine has weight. And carrying those things for years can make anybody tired. So how do you move forward from this? Of course, there are ways you can move forward. You can't be stuck in that version that you feel like is not happening. You know when someone, you think you've gotten to the age of marriage and marriage is not happening and you're still dwelling, you are sad because it hasn't happened. Whereas there are other things you can be doing while waiting for that marriage. How do you move forward from that? The first thing is to allow yourself to acknowledge these disappointments. Stop pretending you are fine when you are not. And I'm not saying you have to speak to somebody like your friend. You can actually speak to yourself. You can have honest conversations with yourself. You know, you can love God and still admit you are disappointed. You can have faith and still admit you are hurting. You can be grateful and still admit that life hasn't gone the way you hoped. Those things can exist together. You can be vulnerable before God. It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you ungrateful. While acknowledging the good things He has done for you, you can still have honest conversations with Him. The second thing is to stop measuring your life only by what hasn't happened. What of the ones that happened? You didn't talk about that one. You weren't happy about that. Or even if you were, it was just for a short period of time. And then you're looking at the ones that haven't happened. You will miss your growth. You will miss your wisdom. You will miss your strength. You will miss the way you have survived things that once almost broke you. Nobody claps for becoming. People clap when they see finished product. But some of the most important work in life happen during the becoming. Thirdly, stop treating your current chapter as the final chapter. For crying out loud, if you read books, there is no book that's just had only one chapter. Most books have a lot of chapters. So why is one chapter of your life defining every chapter that has to do with your life? Your current season is not the conclusion of your story. This is something that I constantly remind myself. It's a chapter, not the ending. And finally, be willing to release the script. Not your dream, the script. Because sometimes God answers our prayer differently than we can imagine. Sometimes life takes a route we never planned. Life shouldn't go just according to how you wrote down, or how you imagined it, or how you wrote it in your head, or how you expected it to happen. Release the script. God can rewrite it and make it more beautiful. Sometimes the destination is beautiful, but the road looks nothing like the map we drew. And that's okay, because growth often happens in places we never plan to visit. So if you're listening to this today and life looks nothing like what you imagined, be gentle with yourself. Mourn what didn't happen. Acknowledge the disappointment. Feel the grief, but don't build a permanent home there, because there's still life ahead of you. There's still opportunities ahead of you. There's still blessing ahead of you. There's still people you haven't met. There are still doors you haven't opened. There's still a version of yourself you haven't discovered. And who knows? You may eventually realize that the life you ended up with may become more meaningful and even become the best than the one you originally planned. There are still dreams that can be born. There are still chapters you haven't read yet. You have to keep believing and be positive about it. We're so quick to give up when it doesn't work our way. We're so quick to grieve. And trust me, the dangers of grieving an expectation for too long is you remain in that mindset. you remain in that stage. You're not open to trying new things in the chapter that you are in currently. You're not open to trying new ideas. You are just stuck with grieving the expectation you must have planned out, a timeline or a target or a goal that you expected to have. And all of that is not going to help you grow. It's only going to make you sad. It's going to make you mourn. It's going to always make you feel like you're not good enough. You didn't do enough. So if you're on this table today, trust me, you didn't find this video by chance. This is me encouraging you that you should not be quick to abandon yourself. Don't be quick to think that your story is over when it's just chapters. A lot of people read books. You don't judge from chapter 1 what will happen at the ending. There's something called a plot twist. And most of the time, plot twists are always beautiful. So please be kind to yourself. Believe in yourself. And try to get over the mourning stage. Get over grieving that expectation and look forward to something else. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope you learned something, and if you can relate, if you're in this position, tell me, how have you done it differently that you think I didn't speak about? How were you able to navigate life? How were you able to, get up from your grief and move on to something next and, trying to build something good? How have you really coped with it? I will be in the comment section and I'll be expecting all your feedbacks and your engagement. See you in my next episode.